It's safe to say that whether you like it or not, the ideologies of Silicon Valley carry weight all over the world. Where in 2000, if you wanted to build a startup, it would make sense finding a technical co-founder and relocating to the Bay Area. Though it's not presumptuous to say in 2020, not only can you build something meaningful in a secondary tech market like Toronto, for example, but when it comes to creating new marketplaces, web apps, mobile apps, landing pages, social networks, SaaS startups, you name it, the rise of the NoCode movement seems to be challenging the very way startups are developed in the first place. The popular startup incubator Y Combinator, based in Silicon Valley, has famously favored technical teams over non-technical and solo founders. However, in recent years, as the no-code movement has gained momentum in the tech world and more dynamic startups built on bubble.io have made it through the Y Combinator program, all signals point to no-code playing a much bigger role in the future of software development. So what is no-code and what is this bubble.io you speak of? Well, in simple terms, sites like Facebook and YouTube were built using a combination of programming languages that are pretty complicated and couldn't completely be picked up overnight by a new programmer. And as a result, the no-code movement is a movement essentially aimed at democratizing the development of software. Webflow, Adalo, VoiceFlow, and of course Bubble.io. These are all no-code tools that enable you to make swanky web pages, build mobile apps, create Alexa skills, and of course, in Bubble's case, build dynamic and database-driven web applications all in a drag-and-drop interface. Furthermore, unlike programming languages like Java or Swift, Bubble can be picked up and used to build real-world applications in a matter of a few weeks. And building a site like Twitter, Netflix, YouTube, or Airbnb is very much possible for a non-technical founder. And so I'm super excited about today's guest, as I'm a big fan of the no-code movement and the product Emmanuel Straschnov has built, that product being bubble.io, of course. I've been a power user of the site since around 2018 and can honestly say it's probably one of the few pieces of software that has changed my life. Emmanuel is from France, he's lived in China, and now resides in New York, where he and his co-founder are based. Of course, during this pandemic, Emmanuel joined me via Google Meet to discuss the future of no-code and how Bubble plays into that. This is The Ones Who Succeed. I'm Campbell Bear, and I hope you're having a great day today. My conversation with Bubble.io co-founder Emmanuel Straschnov starts now. Who are you? Can you introduce yourself?
So my name is Emmanuel Straschnov, originally from France, even though I left France almost 15 years ago now. Been in the US for 10 years, working on Bubble for 8 years now, so it's been quite some time. Came to tech fairly late after doing some years of consulting in China, going to business school in the US, which was my entry point to the US. And I've been on Bubble for quite some time. It's a project that takes many years of work, I think, to get to a good place. But I'm sure we'll cover it.
And what is Bubble? Talk about the product for the people who don't know.
So Bubble is a visual programming language or a no-code tool, which is a new denomination that has been developed by the ecosystem over the last 2 years. But fundamentally, it's a tool that enables people to program without writing code through a visual interface. And so if you log into bubble.io, you can create an account and start building web applications. So what makes us different from a lot of other tools is that it's not websites, it's really web apps in the sense that, Airbnb.com, Facebook.com, or Twitter.com are web applications with a database and a very customized logic behind things instead of, mostly presenting content like some websites do. What we offer is a visual interface to program your application by, designing it pixel by pixel, like element by element with a lot of freedom, like it's not templated in any way. And then you program it by defining some workflows, saying, for instance, if the user clicks here, do this, do that. This, and that being, create something in the database, charge a credit card, send an email, send a text message with Twilio, these kind of things. And the other thing that Bubble is a hosting platform that the cloud platform that hosts everything, because if you tell people they can build things without writing code, it's not to tell them that they're going to have to maintain servers themselves. So, and in fact, what you pay for when you use us is more the servers and the software itself. Like access to the programming software is free, but you start paying when you want to use more capacity or when you want to use your own domain name.
Yeah, so it's very scalable.
Yeah.
And so I've been a fan of Bubble for a while. I think I first found out about it in late 2017. I've been kind of a power user ever since. And before this, just to kind of recap, I listened to your interview with Jason Calacanis on his podcast. And I was cringing when he was comparing it to Squarespace. So do you get that a lot? And kind of talk about how...
So we used to get that a ton. Like, before 2017, yes, before 2018, it's like Squarespace or Wix. And then because no code became a thing, now people compare us to Webflow, which is not great yet because Webflow is closer to Squarespace than we are. It's more of a
Yeah.
CMS and a web app builder. But it is better than being compared to Squarespace or Wix. I mean, in some ways, to be honest, I kind of feel bad for Squarespace and Wix that they're not part of this no-code thing. Because I mean, if Webflow is part of no-code, then Squarespace and Wix should be. Honestly, joke aside, I mean, it is a challenge of our communication. Like, it takes some time, to explain a little bit the value proposition of Bubble, especially because our audience is non-technical, and non-technical people, web application is not, it's not necessarily something that is clear to them. Is it an app? Is it a website? Well, if it's a website, then Squarespace does it. It's a little bit confusing, and so we have to educate people, which, by the way, is the most important thing. The whole Bubble thing is about education eventually, like educating people, how to think like someone that can build product, even though you're not technical yourself. It's our thing anyway. In practice, I think case studies and success stories of what has been built on Bubble is the best way to say how different we are. So when we can tell them, look, we have this fintech startup in San Francisco that processed over $1 billion of loans, which I was talking about with Jason Kalak, and it's, well, you can't do that on Squarespace. That's how we handle it. Every day that goes, the easier it gets. So it's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So talk to me about the inception of Bubble, because before Bubble, I've been kind of into like tech and kind of building projects for a while. And the big problem I would face kind of as a crappy technical programmer is basically my ideas would be limited with my programming ability. I'd want to build X, Y, and Z, and I just couldn't because I didn't know how to build it. And so my ideas would get smaller and smaller and smaller, and eventually they would just be garbage just because I couldn't actually build it. And then I found out about Bubble, and it was kind of this whole life-changing thing, like it is for many people. And so were you a technical programmer before this, or a non-technical programmer who wanted to build something? I know you have a co-founder. Talk about like the inception of the platform.
Yeah, so the inception actually has not much to do with me because Josh, who's my co-founder, started the company. I mean, he didn't start the company was not incorporated, but he had the product idea and the product vision, and actually a very early prototype before I joined, because I joined him a few months in as I was graduating from business school. And the story behind this is basically coming from his experience as a technical co-founder of a startup that he helped start, where he found himself mostly being, the transcriber of the other person's product vision, because it was like for a very specific domain that Josh had very little knowledge about. And he felt like, yeah, I'm creating value here, but it would be so much simpler if that person could do that himself directly. To elaborate a little bit on the story, it was that person was a professional image keyworder. So someone, who takes a picture like for like big photo stock companies and add keywords on them. So it's not like the Instagram type of thing. It's more, there is kind of like a way to proceed to, for marketing agencies so that they can find pictures. And they just he had the idea, to be accurate, of a tool to make that a little bit easier for people to build, to do their job. And so he pitched that to Josh. Josh didn't have a job at that point. He was coming out of Bridgewater, and he was like, oh, this guy sounds interesting. It was not like the typical founder, like not, Ivy League educated or anything. Like it was, a former alcoholic domain expert who had processed over 300,000 images in his life,
Mm-hmm.
And so they built that together and they launched it to market. And it turned out they built something that the people really loved. They had like a great reception for the market. But the problem was that the market was extremely small. It's probably a few hundred people in the world that had that job. And so eventually, sales were not, people were buying it, but only a few hundred people. And so it was not paying enough basically to sustain the life of two people, especially Josh was an engineer with opportunity cost was really high. He could have taken, any job at Google and make a lot of money. And so eventually he ended up quitting, and then that essentially killed the business, that startup. And Josh felt pretty bad about it because it was objectively something that, software was making the life of some people easier, definitely,
Right.
that were doing this job. If this person didn't need Josh, he was making enough money to sustain him and his family. Like it would have been, it wouldn't have been, like a ton of money, but that would have been able to have some kind of a lifestyle business. So effectively, the world was better with that software existed. And the only problem was that Josh was very expensive to build it. And, the words is that engineering is expensive and, creating product is very expensive. And so the initial idea was like, there has to be a way, first of all, for an engineer not to be the transcriber. And second of all, to reduce the cost of creating software, but also to reduce the cost of building software. And so by such order of magnitude that, a non-technical person could sustain a business and solve a real problem, even though it's not necessarily going to be like a crazy market valuation. And so that was the inception behind the company. I mean, so Josh quit, and then he started thinking about that, and he started building a prototype. I think the first line of code was committed in December 2011, and I joined him in June.
Oh, wow.
And so he's technical. At that, I was technical from high school. I did CS in college, but I never thought I would be writing code professionally ever, actually. And then, I was in China in consulting for a few years, management consulting. Then went to Harvard from MBA, where, again, I never thought I would be a technical person ever. And so I met Josh. We connected pretty well. We actually partnered on our first coffee, so you can call that a good connection. And I learned how to code again on the job because I realized pretty quickly there was not much things to do if I was not technical myself. And so today I am technical, even though I don't write as much code today.
So when did you officially start? 2012?
Yeah, we incorporated in August 2012. And we got our first customers in September, and actually our first paying customer in December. So pretty quickly, actually.
And then you raised your seed round quite recently, actually.
Last year, yeah.
Yeah, last year. Okay, so 2012 to last year.
Bootstrapped for like 7 years.
So what was the idea behind that? Why didn't you? I mean, because you probably could have raised a little bit earlier. So why didn't you?
Yeah, we could have. It probably would have killed the business.
So talk about that.
We could have, but it probably would have killed the business. And that's fundamentally why we decided not to raise. And I think actually, not to pat ourselves too much in the back, but I think we were pretty smart on that one. And we saw some companies in 2013, 2014, raising some money in our space and going out of business pretty quickly after this. The reason fundamentally is because the product development cycle for something like Bubble is slow. And by the way, we're not the only one. I mean, look at Webflow. Webflow has been around for a very long time. And when you create like a creation tool, especially something like Bubble that requires to cover a ton of use cases for people to even start thinking that they could use it because of the level of skepticism, because, still today, most engineers would tell you, oh, yeah, those visual things, of course, that doesn't work. You don't have enough control. I don't know what that means, but, you hear that all the time, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't want to go to market too soon with a product that's limited, because otherwise you're only going to reinforce the skepticism that everybody has. And so this takes time. And so effectively the problem with raising money is that when you raise money, you have to, within 18 months to 2 years, deliver very strong product growth for the next round. And if you're not able to do that, then you're basically going to go out of business because you're not going to be able to raise money again. And we just felt in the early years that the product was not ready to do that. And honestly, I think we were right. Now, we could probably have raised money a year earlier, like in 2018. That would have been better than 2019, I guess. But I'm not even sure at that because, so when we raised money, we didn't actually have the word NoCode in our deck because it was on the earlier side of 2019. NoCode really became hot over the summer of last year, I think. However, it was something that VC started talking about, so it did help us definitely raise money.
So, okay, so raising money. So at the time, this was not a brand new product. You definitely had power users in 2019. I was one of them. What was the process like raising money? Was it easy? Were people like lining up, to give you checks, or did you really have to fight for it?
It was fairly easy. I think we got like 4 offers. Having said that, it was stressful. Like, I'm not going to say, we raised everything and people were just, begging us to take our money. Especially being a bootstrap company and being used to not talking to investors, there is a little bit of adjustments to make and everything. That said, we were pretty lucky because I think we had our first investor meeting on like January 30th. And we got a term sheet that we actually picked the term sheet March 1st or March 2nd. So really over like 4 weeks, we kind of finished the whole thing. And yeah, it was a fairly competitive round, even though, it doesn't matter. Honestly, you just need one term sheet.
Yeah.
We were pretty lucky. I think we were coming also, with a profitable business, and we had de-risked a lot the company because the product was working. And some people we already had a very vibrant community online on our forum. Like, people could see that it was actually something that was a real product and not just an idea. Because at the early stage for VCs, like if you come with an idea like that, there is a huge risk on the product. Is the product actually going to deliver what the founders are claiming they will? And we didn't really have that problem because it was clearly something that was working.
Yeah. And it's also like this the idea to build if you're going to pitch a VC on a startup that helps people, build web apps, like that can go a million different ways. The idea could be great, but the buttons, it could be hard to use. It could not do what it says. And this was almost like tried in the late 90s, right?
I mean, it's been tried forever. I think,
yeah.
I think what we're doing is the oldest idea of technology.
Yeah,
be clear.
right.
I mean, even in the 80s with HyperCard, I mean, now it's seen as a new thing, but honestly, I don't understand why people say it's a new thing, because Dreamweaver was about that, Front Page was about that,
Right.
Visual Basic to some extent was about that. Still had some basic, but it was fairly visual. Yeah, that's why I think had we tried to raise money again in 2013, 2014, we would have had a hard time, because at that point, the product, we didn't have like a great product to show. I think today what's happening is it's actually easier today to raise money without a product in the no-code space, because some companies like Webflow and us have paved the way. And so now there is a little bit of a FOMO with investors. But in the early days, that was definitely not possible. And again, look at the Webflow story. I mean, they bootstrapped also for many years. And they were like close to bankruptcy all the time.
So going back to the bootstrap days for you guys, I read that you would hold kind of product feedback meetups at like a coffee shop in New York. Talk about that, and talk about how you kind of were it seems like your customers were pretty engaged in regards to building the company and what features you built in the early days.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you don't have investors, first of all, you only have users to talk to. And then naturally, and could be seen as a good or bad thing, to be honest, you focus less on growth than making your current customers happy, because they reach out to you all the time. And you don't have the pressure of just growing 500% a year or something. And so effectively, when you're talking all the time to your users, when these users depend on you like crazy, because they're building their entire businesses on us, like from the beginning, and that's where we're a little bit different from the maker movement a little bit, because I feel like a lot of what you see on Twitter currently is people like playing around. Our users are not people that play around. Our users, like, they spend 15 hours a day on Bubble. They don't necessarily spend a ton of time on Twitter because they don't have time for that, and they're building businesses that actually have to make money to make a living for them, their family, and their employees. And so when you have people actively building on top of your platform and building their businesses, they're going to have a ton of opinions of where the biggest limitations are, because by definition, something like Bubble will be limited at first. It's a high level of abstraction, compared to code. So still today, I can't say everything you can do with code can be done with Bubble. We removed a ton of barriers after 8 years, but in the early days we had more barriers. And so they're going to have a lot of opinions. And so if you talk to them, they're going to tell you exactly what to do, what they need themselves. And so then we would basically pick, the ideas that we think were the best for the community and build them. Sometimes we would honestly pick our users a little bit and be like, oh, this guy is going far, or this girl, she's going far with her startup. Let's actually invest on him, not with money, but with our time to improve the product in the direction that would help that company more. We do that a lot with our forum. We've always been very community driven. Something after fundraising, we lost a lot. We didn't lose it, but sometimes, I think the community feels we're a little bit more remote. So we're actually working into being more engaged and involved again on the forum, because for the first 7 years, I was on the forum, 10 hours all the time, basically. I was extremely active there. And so we had a very tight relationship with our users to make sure, the product was going in a place where they wanted to go.
And in terms of
that's how you develop product market fit, by the way.
Yeah. And so do you think Bubble has found product market fit now?
Yeah, I think so.
You think so?
I would not have said that 2 years ago, but now I think so, yes.
And in terms of the process,
having said that, we need to improve the product, and there's a lot of things we need to improve. But yes, I think we're pretty close now.
Yeah. And so in the kind of early days building the company, and even now, were there any founders or VCs or just people you kind of looked up to and for advice, or just that you really respected kind of in tech and in the space?
Honestly, we were pretty disconnected from Silicon Valley for the first 5-6 years. Never really tried to get, now it's pretty different, because now through a few of our investors, we really got connected into the Silicon Valley thing, even though still today we're a little bit more remote, I think, that some other companies are, which I think is a strength. It's good to be an outsider in Silicon Valley a little bit. You don't want to be too of an outsider when you fundraise, but I think in terms of, deciding how to build a company, how to build a product, especially for an idea that has been tried so many times over, it's good to be a little bit disconnected. And so to your question, I personally have always looked at Microsoft, especially in the early days, as an extraordinary case of, what I would love to achieve, like an inspiration. But it's not like I was having coffee with Bill Gates every week. So,
Yes.
so, I mean, I wish. Yeah,
But
no, I mean, a lot of the thing in the early days was really just Josh and I. So it was, first of all, the two of us for 5 years also. So that's another thing. Just the two of us and talking to users.
yeah.
And,
And in terms of your kind of fundraise, I noticed you have like Eric Ries as an investor.
Yes.
Who's
actually
the
an
lean
advisor as well. Actually.
An advisor. So the lean startup, that seems like it's a perfect fit. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, Eric is definitely very, very smart. Now, the lean startup, I think, is a little bit for larger corporations these days, where Bubble could be used and I think could be great value. It's not necessarily our core market currently, to be very honest. Like, we're more focusing on like startup building, which, by the way, is another thing that now is more popular. But 4 years ago, like, investors were not fan of this market at all. It's a high churn, a very versatile, not versatile, but very volatile market. I think the recent events, especially with the COVID situation, show that it was actually a pretty good strategy, because when you offer cheap creation tool for people to start companies, sure, it's high churn, but it's a high volume market as well. And then the beauty of the model is that when someone use Bubble for like a startup and the startup doesn't work out, they still know you exist and they still have the skill. And maybe they stop paying, but then they'll bring you to the next company they will be either launching or working at. So back to Eric. I mean, Eric is great as an advisor in general. Around the lean startup thing, it's not something we've pushed extremely hard currently.
Coming up, my conversation with Emmanuel Straschnov, the co-founder of bubble.io, continues. But first, a quick message from our sponsor. This episode of The Ones Who Succeed is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform with thousands of classes in business, marketing, technology, design, and more. You can take classes in social media marketing, video editing, entrepreneurship, you name it, they've got it. So whether you're trying to deepen your professional skill set, start a side hustle, or just explore a new passion, Skillshare is there to keep you learning and thriving. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is the call to action. Skillshare is offering the Ones Who Succeed listeners 2 months of unlimited access to thousands of classes, all for free. To sign up, go to Skillshare.com/succeed. Again, that's Skillshare.com/succeed. That link is how they know the Ones Who Succeed sent you to start your first 2 months now. You can find that link in the description of this podcast, and it would be awesome if you can support our show by supporting our sponsors. So one last time, visit Skillshare.com/succeed to start your first 2 months of Skillshare Premium today. And thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring the show. This is The Ones Who Succeed. I'm Campbell Bear, and I hope you're having a great Wednesday. And I'm about halfway through my conversation with Emmanuel Straschnov. He's the co-founder of bubble.io, so we're going to jump right back into that. And I want to talk a little bit about, because so your target audience is kind of early builders, right? Just getting their initial product launch. I want to talk a little bit about Y Combinator, which has kind of typically been a place that has frowned upon non-technical programmers and kind of solo founders. And then recently, it seems like there have been YC companies that have done well that have been built on Bubble. And that seems like that seems like a quite interesting factor. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we don't have any formal relationship with YC. I know that during the first week, because every cohort, I get a bunch of emails of people reaching out for advice and stuff like that. During the first 2 weeks of the program, they have a few workshops or seminars around, how to get a product out very quickly for user testing. And Bubble is being mentioned quite a few times. So that's great.
Yeah, that is great.
I mean, yeah, it is a little bit. I mean, I think Paul Graham used to say that if you're not technical, your team is not, if non-technical people early on the team are not adding any value. I mean, honestly, I think they're wrong. But it take to change the tools a little bit. I mean, to be fair, in 2012, I think it was kind of true. I mean, if you're not technical, honestly, you're not going to do much on the team at first, right? Yeah. But now with new tools like Bubble reaching some kind of maturity, it's not true anymore. And I'm glad YC is adjusting to that.
Have you received, and you kind of talked about it, but I'm sure you receive hate. And are there engineers who email you who are like, this product's bullshit, like this is bad. This, you know
No,
what I
I mean,
mean?
like, we're not big enough to have people that email us out of the blue to send us like death threat and insult emails. No. Joke aside, there has been a few intense threads on Hacker News where it was mostly negative about even trying. Like, and it was coming from engineers that didn't try the product. And then you always
Right.
have like 2 or 3 people that tried it and say, well, you should still give it a try. I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, these things just help us because the more activities there is in
Yeah.
Hacker News, the higher you get on the top of the list. And that's
Yeah.
all I care about at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think the skepticism was extremely strong in the early years, but then, and to be fair, I mean, they were not entirely wrong because the previous attempts all have failed, had failed. So because they failed, it's fine to be skeptical. My personal opinion is that if you're an engineer, skepticism is a strength, but thinking things are impossible and can be solved through technology is a weakness of an engineer. So I think the brightest engineer should not think that in this way, but whatever. Today, it's much more rare, though. I mean, we still get some. So our user base traditionally was highly non-technical, like 95% of our users were non-technical. Today, we're probably like 30, 70, so 30 technical, 70 non-technical, which means because now also you can extend Bubble with code. So being a coder is not necessarily a bad thing if you use Bubble. And I'm glad of that trend. So we get sometimes, some users that are more technical emailing us, questioning some of the technical decisions we've made in terms of architecture that they think is not optimal. Sometimes they have a point, but then you have other constraints and stuff like that. But I think we're done with the phase where it's just, it's impossible. Now the question is more, can it scale?
Right.
Which is a real thing, by the way. I mean, like we spend a lot of time right now, improving how Bubble scales for applications in production, because I mean, it is actually a challenging problem. I mean, it is hard. Like when you empower people to do pretty much whatever they want, they're going to come with crazy designs that you need to optimize for behind the scene, and it's not easy. So we have questions around that, but then, whenever we solve one of these things, the level of skepticism goes down, and it will keep going down that way. But I think starting in New York was a great thing for us. I think it would have been hard to start that in New York in the early 2012, because at that time, the community over there was so focused on, the latest, frameworks like Meteor, Angular, React, these kind of things, that I think that would have been hard to sell something like Bubble even to the friends around us, because, in the early years of a company or early months, you're definitely going to do a lot of selling in person, especially for something like Bubble that is hard to, like, someone last week emailed me still saying, it seems too good to be true. So when people say that, it's a great sign, but it's actually not something you can sell through a digital ad or a TechCrunch press release. And so being in New York was good, because in New York, people were much less opinionated about technology. They were like domain experts that wanted to get something off the ground, and they don't actually work if your backend is using this technology or that technology, which was not the case in Silicon Valley back then. But now I think Silicon Valley is a little bit more open-minded.
And so as you
I mean,
go
they have to be. So
yeah, no, well, it's the change is coming as you go from, as Bubble kind of evolves from just a place where people because if you think about it, Bubble kind of works on the similar lines of the venture model, right? Where you're going to have a bunch of people trying a bunch of different ideas, and a small percentage of them are going to work out, and the small percentage that does work out, they will help you a lot, because X was built on Bubble or Y was built on Bubble, and people love X and Y. So you talk about on your site, it says you kind of want to be there from ideation to IPO. Talk about kind of how you need to get there. And do you think in 10 years you're going to have people that are, are teams going to be filled with just Bubble engineers, like Bubble website builders?
I hope so. I mean, it's actually already happening effectively.
So talk
for
about
some
that.
teams. Like we do have some companies that don't have engineers, and they have like 3 or 4 people just working on Bubble every day, and they actually move much faster than other companies, because one of the great value of Bubble, NoCode in general, but Bubble in particular, is that it's not just easier and cheaper to build on, it's also much faster. And you can iterate very quickly, which like you can literally get to a product. Once you know how to use it, you can get to a product in like 2 weeks. An engineering team wouldn't do that. For us, we're a little bit similar to a VC model in the sense that, I mean, I don't know if it's VC model or more of like a traditional long tail. I mean, I guess it's the same thing. VCs are like that, like a long tail type of business, like Shopify or Stripe, for instance, where you're going to have like, a few players that do most of our sales revenue, and a ton of people that do not much and pay, like $20 a month or something, or $30 a month. And how do we get to IPO? Well, by doing what we're doing today. I mean, I wish it were going faster, as always. I mean, I always want things to move faster than they actually are. But, the team is working hard on making sure we scale well. At some point at this scale, I think we need to work on the top of the funnel. So we're pushing more on growth than ever, because for the first years of the company, honestly, until fall last year, we didn't do any growth work. It was mostly organic. Now we're being a little bit more active in trying to get people to start building onto the platform. And on the later stage of the funnel, which is more of an engineering problem and to some extent a success function problem thing to solve, making sure that when companies start really scaling, they can scale on us nicely. There's no secret recipe here, just keep it up with your users. The beauty of our model is, and this is actually something that VCs don't have, is that, if we solve the scaling problems for one company, it basically solves the problem for all the others that come after that.
Right.
So
right.
In some ways, we mutualize, development efforts across companies, and that's a pretty powerful way to scale.
And so I almost think of Bubble almost like in the same mind as Shopify, right? Because Shopify has their platform where kind of entrepreneurs can start e-commerce stores, and Bubble has their platform where, entrepreneurs can, build products. Obviously, Bubble is much more complex in the types of things that you can build, and I don't think it's generally like known for e-commerce per se. But Shopify also has their marketplace where people kind of build extensions, things on top of websites, and Bubble has the exact same thing.
Exactly. So, it's not rocket science. Like we didn't invent, the marketplace. Like
no. I think it's right? Well, I think that's kind of what makes Bubble, because if you look at a lot of, because that's basically each plugin is a feature, and each feature enables you to do something more.
I think it's a very, very core to our vision. I'm actually surprised that other NoCode tools don't have that, to be honest. Like this plugin marketplace, because at some point you need to be. If you want NoCode to win, you need to be feature complete. And being feature complete means doing exactly the same thing as code. Now, it's impossible because it's a higher level of abstraction. Now, what is possible is to let people write code if something is missing and then make it available, which is a very powerful way to have leverage, because then one technical person can write the code that can be used by 1,000 of bubblers that don't write code. It's a little bit, like the open source philosophy, if you will, but it's accessible to non-technical people, while open source is for technical people.
Yeah.
So the leverage is much higher. But it is extremely core to, that's why I'm also not a fan of the no-code denomination, because no-code assumes that there is no code, which is not true. Right. Bubble, there is code if you want to. Just in practice, it's probably 2% of the time that 2% of apps actually require custom code, and other people benefit from the code written by others. But it is very important, because if you don't have this open way for technical people to add features to the platform, your users will hit a dead end, and that's the last thing I want.
So one of the other things I think about as Bubble kind of grows, and no code, I know you just mentioned it's not no code, but whatever, the no code movement, right, as that scales, there will be this dramatic influx in startups just everywhere, right? As in 10 years, I think the number of startups will 10x. Do you think that's I'm guessing you think that's a good thing, but do you think there's some negative side effects with that?
Yeah, there are always negative side effects with things. How to put this? A lot of startups are essentially bad ideas, and it's good for people to try them, but maybe we should be working on more important problems that some of the problems that some startups are trying to solve, And in some ways, we encourage people to create more things and potentially lose some time on some ideas that are not worth pursuing. On the flip side, though, Bubble makes it so cheap to create startups that it's not, and much faster, that it's not too costly for society to have a lot of startups that start on Bubble, because it's literally at first like going to be a few weekends for a person to launch something, show it to their friends, and have validation. I think I'm much more concerned, honestly, when I see Silicon Valley betting a ton of money in some stuff where I don't think we need more of these companies, because then we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that could be allocated in places where I think technology would make a big difference, and we don't have enough money on those things. The example I use all the time is food delivery startups. Do we need that many? In the current context, we need them, yes, because of COVID. So maybe I'll change my mind for the future. But in practice, when you look at the amount of VC money that is allocated to making the life of affluent urban millennials better, I think this is wrong. I think there are a lot of people in the world that would benefit from technology and startup innovation being applied to their problems, but I think because the economic outcome is not necessarily going to be the same one, because again, the urban rich millennial have more purchasing power, so VCs, that's where they're focusing. I do think, whether it's at the bottom of the pyramid or whether, it's some of the flyover states where I think there is much more potential good for the world if we were allocating technology there, but the economic outcome is not good enough. And so the solution for that is to make technology cheaper so that we start, solving problems of people that don't have the same purchasing power, but still improve their lives. And so if we have a ton of startups that work more on those things at a more local level, then it's great. If we have more food delivery startups that capture most of the VC money raised, it's kind of sad.
Yeah, we kind of danced around this, but can you talk a little bit about some of the major Bubble success stories? Because there are some, and I think that's kind of what gets people excited about the software.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes it's hard to describe what the success story is because people have different opinions of what it is. So to give you some examples, so there is an example I just mentioned, like Dividend Finance, who has processed over $1 billion of loans of business volume through a Bubble-built software. We have 3 companies that got into YC. In Paris, we have like a data scientist marketplace for large companies, like a Fortune 500 that was started entirely on us. It's actually a pretty cool story because they scaled to 800,000 euros, which is almost like dollars AR, raised around. The investors that came in told them that they should have a CTO because, it was a long time ago. It was like 3 years ago. Why would you do that with this thing like Bubble? Come on. So they hired the CTO, redeveloped everything eventually. So they went through different phases. I think the last round was about 13 million. And they're actually coming back to Bubble now because because they're not going to fire the engineers, but the new product developments happen through Bubble.
That's incredible.
If the reason being, it's not because you raised $13 million that you can have, you're going to have an easier time hiring engineers, but it's still going to be slow to, the engineering process fundamentally except if you're building something radically new, is much longer than it should for innovative products, and Bubble makes it much faster. And then more recently, I mean, we had this long-time user in LA starting like a platform for people to buy gift cards for restaurants, in the context of COVID. Yeah. And he launched it, I think, on like Saturday, and by the following Thursday, he was acquired by USA Today to give it like a national reach. And that shows the value of NoCode. I mean, he saw a problem at the local level. I guess I haven't. We actually had him on our podcast, but I didn't talk to him myself. Probably had some people around him that were restaurant owners, and so he saw this problem, and he could like build it in a matter of hours, basically, and launch it. So NoCode lets you react super quickly to market circumstances in a way that code makes it harder. And so that got him to like national attention within a week, which is pretty cool.
That's very cool. Okay, and a few more questions. This is a very specific, I don't even know if I'll use this, but is there any logistical process in regards to a Bubble site being acquired? Does it, what's going to happen in 5 years? Does it transfer ownership, basically? How does that work?
I mean, it's the same as any other web service, If you get acquired and you run an AWS, I guess you're going to, I don't know, haven't been acquired, but I'm sure people have figured this out. You're going to share your AWS credentials with the acquiring entity, I mean, usually, it depends, right? A lot of acquisition, they keep the same team. So if you keep the same team, my guess is actually nothing changes. It's not like, the corp dev at AWS will want your passwords. They don't care. I mean, they're legally protected, if you do something stupid. If you were to hand over a website, we had that request a few times, like people, emailing us and said, hey, can I transfer the app ownership to this person? And, we confirm with both parties that we do it. From an IP perspective, whether it's code or whether it's a Bubble app, it's the same, It's like you own if you build something on Bubble, you own your app, you own your app design, you own everything. So we can definitely transfer ownership to that.
And what motivates you to kind of keep doing this? Is it the product? Is it the problem? Are you motivated, by the idea of building this big company? What keeps you going?
I mean, it's a combination of things, and honestly, it goes in phases, right? Over 8 years, it's a pretty long time. It really started with when you create like a creation tool, open-ended creation tool, watching people build things that you didn't think were possible is the best thing ever. And so the excitement from our users is something that has really always kept Josh and I going in the early years where, we didn't take salaries for 3 years. Like it was tough at that time. Today, our users really depend on us. So honestly, stopping is not an option. Like, if we were to shut down tomorrow, it's probably, 10, 20,000 people would lose their job, I guess. And, it's a responsibility. We can do that. And then like the moral imperatives for, Bubble needs to keep existing and keeps, supporting the people that are already on the platform is very high. And then I would even go further. especially in the context of what we see today, with people getting, laid off and trying to find like alternative way to build income. Like the world needs something that bubble to exist, and it's actually a more imperative for the team to put it in front of more people so that they can, if they want to, build something on the side and create something. That's like the social mission behind the company is probably what drives our team. Obviously, we want to be a big company. Big company, there are many ways to describe that. So I'm not sure I want to be like a massive thing. I'd rather keep the team lean and stuff like that. But I want to build something that has global scale. And that means being big in some ways. But our history being bootstrapped, we never build things in the way to try to do a quick hold up as Silicon Valley is a customizer. Like look at the recent Clubhouse thing, right? It's not necessarily what has been driving us ever. Now, we don't want to reach massive scale and everything, but what's even more important is just make sure that, we fulfill the mission that we set for ourselves and that I think the world needs to be solved. Honestly, if it's not us, I hope someone else does solve that mission of making, democratizing creation tools online, and in particular, like, programming tools, because to me, it's one of the bigger problems we're going to have to solve. Right now we have bigger things to handle, honestly, really, but long term, having a world where you only have, less than 1% of the world population that can create valuable things online, like applications, is not healthy. And we start seeing the problem of that with Silicon Valley, where it's essentially a few tens of thousands of young male, mostly. Like it's pretty homogeneous from a race perspective, mindset and everything. This is very dangerous. We need more people to be able to create things, to solve problems for themselves and people around them in their local communities. And if we don't solve it, I hope someone else does, because otherwise, at some point, the rift is going to be too big and this is not going to end well.
Well, I think my last question is, in 10 years, where do you see Bubble?
Well, I hope in 10 years we're like ubiquitous, which means we're the platform where people build software, whether it's for startups, personal projects in college or high school, large corporations, SMBs, like everyone would be using us. I think there is an opportunity here to become like the new language that people use. Just happens not to be code based; it's going to be click based. I don't know what it will look like in 10 years. I have some opinions, but we'll see exactly how we have evolved. But basically, creating the common platform where everybody builds things on top of. Probably not like thousands of employees. I think there are, with technology in the modern age, you can do so much with a small team that will keep the team like fairly lean. Obviously more than the 25 people we have today, but I don't know, like a few hundred people, I guess, and make sure that, we keep, again, moving forward the mission that we set for ourselves, which is democratize creation tools. That's really what we're here for.
Okay, and this is my last question, I promise. You made the Bubble right now. You made the decision to, it's a web app builder. When is the mobile app builder coming? This is a question I've been curious about, and is that even going to come? Do you think there's going to be a need for that?
I hope next year. I can't commit to it. Definitely not this year. I really want to make sure we nail the web before moving to native apps, but it's definitely on the roadmap. I can't tell you exactly when though.
All right. Well, Emmanuel, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk. I'm a big fan.
Thank you. That was very fun.
That's Emmanuel Straschnov, one of the ones who succeed. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this show, it would be amazing if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us out. Or why not tell a friend? That also helps new listeners discover the show. I really appreciate it. If you want to see clips from the show and stay up to date with what I'm working on, you could follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. My username is @CampbellJBarron, and my YouTube channel is my name, Campbell Barron. You've made it to the end of the show. Thanks for listening. I'm Campbell Barron, and I'll be back in no time.